Hello, and thanks for joining me. Today we're looking at this guy.
God is Not Great was written by Christopher Hitchens. Hitchens died in 2011 and is currently working on the sequel, Hell is Not Great.
You are so fucking funny!
Is this the moral fruit of a religion which is superintended by an all-good, all-loving deity? I ask because it comes from a video called A Christian Intro to Atheism, which I'm gonna pull a Cory Doctorow and appropriate the title for this video. The guy's name is Wade, and he seems to specialize in short videos filled with what I suppose would be called shock content. Calling Caitlyn Jenner a T-word, for instance. That certainly has a double meaning, otherwise he would have just said transgendered. And I do see he has a video on the logical problem from evil, but like the vast majority of atheist philosophers, when I deploy the argument from evil, it's the evidential argument, not the logical argument. So that doesn't interest me. An overall introduction to atheism from a Christian perspective? That always interests me. But look at the length. He's proposing to give a Christian introduction to atheism in a 90-second video, and the last 10 seconds is taken up with a standard like, subscribe, etc. So really, Wade gives himself 80 seconds to deliver a Christian introduction to atheism. The last time I dealt with someone who wanted to give an overall look at atheism or an introduction to atheism from a Christian perspective, it was an evangelist named Joey Bernas who delivered a half-hour lecture to the group formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, with a special focus on the history of atheism. He actually did a halfway decent job. He made a number of factual errors and unsupported assertions, but he was about as thorough as it's possible to be on the subject in the space of half an hour. By necessity, however, he left a lot out. And this guy's gonna do it in 80 seconds? Because of the brevity of this video, I was originally gonna double it up with another video. But as it turns out, I have a lot to say about this. Seriously, depending on how fast or slow I talk when recording this may end up putting Brandolini's Law to shame.
Atheism is an all but extinct belief system.
See what I mean? 2 factual errors in the first 2 seconds alone. All but extinct. Sociologist Phil Zuckerman estimates that there are between 500 and 750 million people in the world who lack belief in the existence of a deity. On the low end of that estimate, there are as many atheists in the world today as there were people in existence anywhere in the world at the time Da Vinci started the Mona Lisa. On the high end, there are as many atheists today as there were people in the world when Handel finished the Messiah. All but extinct, that's one error. Belief system is the other. Atheism is to belief as baldness is to hair color. And atheists will certainly have their own system of beliefs, but ask any 10 atheists on YouTube a question about a given point of their beliefs, other than belief in gods, and you'll get at least 11 different answers. Getting us as a group to agree on anything is worse than herding cats. Atheism is not a belief system.
That started in the Garden of Eden.
First of all, needless to say, there's no historical or archaeological evidence that the Garden of Eden or anything like it ever existed. It's biologically impossible for the human race to have come from a single reproductive pair 6,000 years ago. I don't know if you believe in biology, Wade, but, and I'm kind of dating myself as a middle-aged guy here, biology will have its way with you regardless. Second, according to the story from the Christian Bible, there were 2 people in the Garden of Eden, and neither of them were atheists. Both of them believed that God existed. And again, taking the story at face value, both of them had compelling reason to believe that God existed. He was talking to them, clearly communicating in whatever language Adam and Eve would have spoken. As did a snake. You know, I've made it a point my entire life to stay far, far away from any snakes, but I'm pretty sure that if snakes could talk, I would have seen it on the internet. But again, since we're just going with it here, even the snake was not an atheist. God clearly said to the snake, hey, you told him to eat the fruit, get ready for some belly crawling. There was no atheism in the Garden of Eden. There was no Garden of Eden either, but even if there was, not one atheist lived in it.
And was finally killed off by the neckbeard fedora meme.
Again, dating myself as a middle-aged guy here, but I had to look that up. Neckbeard fedora meme has been around for about 10 years. Atheism has been around, well, not since the Garden of Eden, but for a long time. The first sentient person on Earth was technically an atheist, unless you'd like to argue that theism predated human sentience. A stronger and perhaps more meaningful concept of atheism would be in the context of theism. The first atheist was the first person to whom someone said, hey, let me tell you about this thing I believe, and who responded, yeah, no, I don't believe that. Atheism predates the neckbeard fedora meme by thousands, if not millions of years. What hubris to think that attaching words to a man with a hat and calling it clever would kill it off. Atheism, in short, is alive and well.
Almost every atheist was once a member of another religion.
That's something that becomes less and less true with every passing year. More and more people are growing up without ever having been in a religion, without ever having believed in any sort of theism, without ever having to deconvert. I would love to know the exact statistics about how many atheists grew up without religion versus how many deconverted, but based on admittedly anecdotal data, it's not true, or at least no longer true, to say that almost every atheist was once religious.
So it's sort of a religion of converts.
And I believe, people, I truly believe that there is no God. Yes, sir, I have faith, people, I have faith that there is nothing in the sky but clouds and wishes and it just occurred to me that the irony of what I'm doing will be lost on a great many theists. Theists who, on seeing this clip, will nod sagely and say, see, what did I tell you? Atheism is a religion. This sarcastic guy, David John Wellman, proves it.
And of the world's religions, atheism has to be the most boring. I mean, you guys couldn't have come up with anything? List of holy texts.
Yeah, you know why we don't have a list of holy texts? Not a religion. Or is that what you were trying to say? That was a weird kind of a jump cut there. Was there like a hiccup in the editing booth? Do you need a glass of water, Wade?
You know, for people who don't believe in God, they sure have a lot to say about him.
I wish we didn't. There are more interesting things to talk about than what is, to me at least, the very obvious reality of the non-existence of a theistic God. Games I'm playing, books I've read, the latest scientific discoveries, and even philosophical questions like why something exists rather than nothing, or why the universe consists of matter and energy. These are good questions, and just because we've ruled out the possibility of theism being the answer, doesn't mean we've answered them. So why do we talk a lot about God? Because in a world where a great deal of harmful action occurs in the socio-political realm, leading to a great deal of suffering, and I'm talking about everything from religious wars and inquests to watching a stupid religious YouTube video that makes my brain hurt, there is a place and there is a need for dissent. And as part of that dissent, we sometimes talk about the character of God himself because it reveals a fundamental contradiction in the theistic worldview. That on the one hand, God is as described in the scriptures, and on the other hand, he is worthy of worship.
I mean, atheists write so much. Here are just a few of their standout titles: The God Delusion and God Is Not Great. I'm lumping these two together because most atheists just skim the first couple of chapters of both in high school, amounting to almost one whole book read.
Yet again dating myself here, but those books didn't come out until I was well out of college and well entrenched in my atheism. And for a long time, they actually made me wince because I didn't feel that they were addressing or that they were adequately addressing the central question, the only question that really matters, which is the question of whether it's all true or not. The most I felt they established was that if it is true, if God exists and is as described in scripture, we're all screwed, because such an unpleasant deity certainly can't be trusted to keep his word when he promises anyone he's going to save them. I then came to realize that they had succeeded in establishing the contradiction I'd mentioned earlier. As for skimming the first couple chapters, I think you'll find that atheists are voracious readers. In fact, and I believe this quote comes from Andrew Seidel, the road to atheism is littered with Bibles that have been read cover to cover. Have you read the Bible cover to cover, Wade? There's a good chance you have. Many Christians have, despite one of the more popular atheist stereotypes. But in a Bible trivia competition, I would wager on someone like Dan Barker or Matt Dillahunty against any preacher you might name, to say nothing of you yourself, Wade.
Both titles are designed to make my mom mad, and I hate to break it to you fellas, but she doesn't care.
First of all, fellas? You think all atheists are fellas? Hey Smoppet, you're an atheist. Are you a fella?
Don't let the hairs on my chinny chin chin fool you. I am a lady. Yes, I am a woman.
Cool, that's what I thought. Maybe when he says
David, you have not been putting in enough guinea pig content, not nearly enough. Please, I'm begging you to put in more guinea pig content or else I will unsubscribe.
You know that running gag I have where I have random people come onto my videos and tell me how to run my channel? Yeah, I need to stop doing that. Anyway, maybe when he says fellas, he's just talking about the authors of these two books. But one, as we've established, is dead, and the chances of the other ever watching your video, Wade, are, mathematically speaking, diddly. Second of all, I'll be the first to admit that the titles are designed to grab attention and sell copies, and publishers do feel that being controversial is a good way to do that. In fact, anyone with even a little knowledge of how the publishing industry works knows that's why books tend to have controversial titles. Not unlike you calling your video a Christian Intro to Atheism.
The God Delusion was written by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, and if you can get through a full chapter without laughing, you're more highly evolved than I am.
I didn't get through a chapter without laughing at least once, but that's because, say what you will about Dawkins, he knows how to keep his audience entertained. I've only read one book by a Christian apologist or evangelist who could accomplish that feat on purpose. It was a book by Steve Unwin called The Probability of God, a simple calculation that proves the ultimate truth. How's that for an attention-grabbing title? And it was actually recommended by Dawkins himself, who said it was quite agreeably funny. And he was right. I enjoyed reading it. I was not convinced by his arguments, but I enjoyed reading it. That's the only apologist or evangelist who could keep me intentionally entertained through the course of a book. As for unintentional entertainment, there was at least one apologetics book that had me laughing my ass off, not just with every chapter, but with literally every page. Suffice it to say that the entertainment value of this book is entirely unintentional. Now, if apologetics books could actually reveal the ultimate truth, as Unwin's publisher promised and failed to deliver on, it wouldn't really matter that they failed to entertain, because that's not what I'm really after. But still, apologetics is boring. Evangelism is boring. It just is.
God is Not Great was written by Christopher Hitchens. Hitchens died in 2011 and is currently working on the sequel, Hell is Not Great.
To what I've already said about this little quip, I'll simply add, F you, Wade. Hitchens was a smarter and more eloquent man than in your wildest dreams you could ever hope to be.
Letters to a Christian Nation. This is Sam Harris's book of letters written to America.
Twice, he refers to the book, which literally appears next to his face, as letters, plural.
And you know, it's nice to hear someone admit that America is or was a Christian nation. Now, if only we could get our Christian leaders to say the same.
What Harris was admitting is that demographically speaking, most of the citizens in this country are Christians. So that's 3 of the 4 so-called horsemen of new atheism. And although it does seem to be the case that your video is terse by intention, you've nonetheless had nothing to offer but snide remarks that don't address the content of the books you've mentioned. In fact, in 2 cases out of 3, you've given absolutely no indication that you've read the book yourself. You've only read the title. And in the case of Letter to a Christian Nation, letter singular, you apparently didn't even read that much. If you had read Sam Harris, you would already know what he meant by Christian Nation, as I've already covered. If you had read Christopher Hitchens, you would be aware of his argument that the doctrine of hell, whether preached sincerely or for shock value, is precisely one of the things that makes a God which superintends this preaching less than great. Now, it wouldn't surprise me that your video is intended for a Christian audience. But let's say I'm a Christian, and I've heard of these books, and I'm worried that there might be something in God is Not Great, or Letter to a Christian Nation, that might cause me to doubt and perhaps even abandon my faith. So I come to your video looking for assurance. Is there anything to worry about in God is Not Great?
Hitchens died in 2011 and is currently working on the sequel, Hell is Not Great.
Okay, very funny. What about Letter to a Christian Nation?
And you know, it's nice to hear someone admit that America is or was a Christian nation.
Okay, that wouldn't help me at all if I was a Christian. And even merely calling the contents of the God Delusion laughable is far from reassuring. But like I said, that's 3 of the 4 horsemen. The one you have yet to address is, of course, Daniel Dennett. So what will you have to say about his book, Breaking the Spell?
r/atheism. They say that if you had a bunch of monkeys hammering away at a typewriter, eventually you'd get the works of Shakespeare. Well, this Reddit thread is the closest thing we have, and if I were you, I wouldn't be looking there for the next King Lear.
Oh. So you're not mentioning Daniel Dennett at all? Well, maybe you're working up to him, because that can't possibly be it for this week.
That's it for this week.
I stand corrected. So of the 4 horsemen, you called one laughable, and that's it. You made jokes off the titles of 2 others, and the 4th, by far the most sophisticated and most philosophically rigorous of the bunch, you didn't mention at all, aiming instead at the least philosophically rigorous force for atheism there is, the atheism subreddit, which, to be fair, is about as chaotic as you make it out to be. So let's ask ourselves this. Did you say anything in this video that actually contradicts the truth of atheism? In other words, did you say anything that says atheism is wrong? I'm not asking if you proved it's wrong. I wouldn't expect that from an 80-second video. I'm asking if you said even one thing that contradicts the truth of atheism. The closest you come is making the ridiculous assertion that atheism started in the Garden of Eden, which to many Christians implies the truth of at least one of the Abrahamic religions. But to many other Christians, if not most Christians, the Garden of Eden is allegorical. Same with the Christopher Hitchens quip. Many Christians believe that hell is allegorical, and those are the Christians I like to call the good Christians. And in any case, it's pretty obvious to everyone that you were joking. So if you were going up against an atheist on the question of whether God exists, and this was your opening statement, you would lose by default. One could accept everything you say in this video and still not believe that God exists. I'm sure if you were debating an atheist and had 20 minutes to work with instead of a minute and a half, you would have found space to at least mention one or two of the arguments for God's existence. But just think about it. A Christian intro to atheism. This means you're either introducing atheism to Christians or you're introducing it as a Christian, or both. Wouldn't it have been appropriate to state why atheism is wrong? Was it really too much to ask that you, take one of the classical arguments and presented it in condensed form? Like this, watch. The existence of apparently pointless suffering in the world must, by the principle of credulity, be taken to be actually pointless suffering in the absence of a successfully established theodicy, and the existence of actually pointless suffering is strong evidence against the existence of an all-powerful, all-loving God. See how easy that is? That took about as much time to say as your King Lear quip did. Was that little joke of yours really such a great zinger that you couldn't make even one single argument? Wouldn't at least one such argument have been appropriate for a Christian introduction to atheism? Oh, and there's another thing. Christian. There's absolutely nothing in your video that sets your presentation apart from one that might have been made by a Jew or a Muslim, or for that matter by a Hindu who is taking the Garden of Eden allegorically. There is nothing uniquely Christian about this intro, and there's nothing that establishes the most important thing about atheism from a Christian point of view, why it's wrong. This was not a Christian intro to atheism. This was a random guy making random jokes at atheism's expense. Now, it's your channel, of course, Wade, and you can do what you like with it, but honestly, would a little truth in advertising have killed you? If you enjoyed this video and want to help my channel grow, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Be sure to hit the bell to be notified when new videos are released. And if you want to share how you would introduce atheism in 80 seconds or less, leave a comment below. Special thanks to Smoppet for lending a hand with this video. You can check out her channel in the description. And thanks as always to you for watching. We'll see you in the next video. I'm David John Wellman, and the rest is up to you.